All right, folks, welcome to another edition of Outspoken. I'm Dan Sileo. What an absolutely awesome time it is in sports. Seeing the NFL back on the tube again, full slate of games both on Thursday, Friday, and of course today, getting you NFL ready and getting you ready for the 2026 season. How about this, too? We are 2 weeks away from the start of college football. Major League Baseball news, guys, let's start it up. Fire the cannons. As we just mentioned, NFL preseason is here. I know many people look at these games and go, well, they don't really count. Well, they do count. There's 53 men on a football roster, right? Well, that means over 35 players still have to be selected to fill out the rosters. A lot of fans don't understand. The war of attrition is what wins Super Bowls. Everyone knows the top 22 players on every NFL team, but it's the back 35 that help you win Super Bowls. Depth. This is where you're battling it out for a guy who's maybe going to be your swing offensive tackle, your third deep edge rusher, maybe another defensive tackle. How many players do you keep at wide receiver? Do I go 3 quarterbacks? Do I go 2 quarterbacks? This is how rosters are created, and this is how championship rosters are built. Going and finding the right 53. Listen, you can go out there and you can get all the superstars you want like the Rams have. But do they have a complete roster? Will they have a roster that overcomes an injury that you're going to get throughout a year? Everyone knows the war of attrition is what wins Super Bowls. Can you overcome it? That's why preseason football is still important. Look, you may not keep score when it comes to the scoreboard, but scoreboards on the field, also for players, folks, having been one of these guys that are down there at the bottom of the 53-man roster, lives are going to change here. Lives will continue as a football man, or life can end as a football man. You know, you play high school football, your last football game, many people remember, it's over. You get to college, you get another opportunity to go 4 or 5 more years and play college football. Here you are right now for football life, whether or not you're going to continue that. Dreams are continued or ended here with these next couple weeks. This is what preseason football means to me. So when I watch these games, I watch these games intently. What guy gives you the best effort? I'll take all these guys that go out there and fight their asses off and put those men on my roster. Those are the guys you fill out the bottom of your roster. Those are the guys that you're going to need if you're going to go on and win a Super Bowl. A couple years ago, when the Philadelphia Eagles had one of the best rosters I've ever seen in the 2024 season, they won it with the war of attrition. Darius Slay went out. They brought in Isaiah Rodgers. They had an issue with Nakobe Dean at linebacker. They bring in Oren Burks. They had an issue with Fred Johnson. And what did they do? They brought an offensive tackle in, and they were able to overcome some of the losses there of Mulata and Lane Johnson. And they would go on and win a Super Bowl. That's what preseason football means. Also, you get a good look at some of the young quarterbacks, like a Fernando Mendoza we saw the other night, who I thought looked pretty good in his debut. Carson Beck a week ago with the Arizona Cardinals. This is what you look for in preseason football. All right, so let's go over to Colorado. What can I say that we haven't really said already? Let's face it, this has been a failure. He's 16-21, Deion Sanders. Now, reporters who cover the team, beat reporters, are not allowed to cover what they see at practice. They're not allowed to put any columns together on what you see at practice. You've been barred from talking and reporting on anything that goes on at the Colorado Buffaloes training camp. Why? I thought this was all about publicity, getting the program exposure, all the things that Deion brought. You know, the one thing that Deion hasn't brought is winning. Like I said, he's 16-21. He's 9-18 in conference play. He's not succeeding here. Curt Cignetti has absolutely put a spotlight on all of these coaches, like a Deion Sanders, that is supposed to go into a place and turn the fortunes around for a place like Colorado. Hey, on one hand, you could say that it's been a success because look at the money that's being generated and look at some of the exposure that Deion has brought. But that's flash in the pan stuff. He's not a very good Division I football coach. His record dictates it. Has he ever beaten a top 20 football team that was rated at the end of the year? The answer is no. You're talking about a program that is really not a very good football program. It's all flash. You know, when Dan Lanning said that, the head football coach of Oregon, we're not all about social media clicks and we're not all about the flash and the glitz. We're more talking about winning football games at Oregon. He was right. Why in God's name would you want to go and play at Colorado right now for Deion Sanders when most of the players that he recruits from his office want to leave? Think about that. I mean, you're not bringing in top flight kids to stay there and want to play football for you because they know in the end it's not about winning. It's really more about the flash. 16-21. It's been a failure, and there's no other way to look at it. And I remember people like Bayless saying all these things that Deion was going to win a national championship at Colorado. Skip was going around, and so were a lot of people like Shannon Sharp saying, hey, look, I would not be shocked if you see Colorado in the college football playoff. College football playoff? How about being a 500 football team? Let's start with that. It's been an absolute failure in Boulder with Deion Sanders with a 16-21 record. All right. So James Pierce, the talented Tennessee edge rusher that now plays for the Atlanta Falcons, has been suspended by the National Football League for 8 games for violating the NFL's conduct policy. Pierce was arrested in February in Doral, Florida, after a domestic dispute involving his girlfriend, ex-girlfriend, of the Los Angeles Sparks. Well, let me say this to the kid. You're lucky you're not in prison. You're lucky you're not being banned from the National Football League for the rest of your life. You're ramming your car on the way to the police station to stop her from going in and reporting domestic violence. You know, the National Football League tries to tell us all the time about character. You got a head football coach up in New England that's out dancing around with some chick who's a reporter and he's married. And now you're telling me you got a guy here that you suspended for 8 games and you're not making a bigger stance on that. 8 games? Hey, look, let's put it out here. You got to stand for something. You can't beat women up. You can't beat children up. You can't beat animals up. Stand for something, dude. How do you keep people like this in the league? You beat a woman and you give them an 8-game suspension? You got to be kidding me. You've got to stand for something. You know, I say this all the time to folks. The NFL constantly will glaze over situations like this when it comes to domestic violence. Holy cow. You hear Roger Goodell make that comment that the head football coach in New England didn't violate any of the conduct policies in the NFL. And now you've got James Pierce ramming his car on the way to the police station so a girl doesn't report him to the police for domestic violence, and you keep him in your league. No wonder people look sometimes at the NFL players and say, hey, you play in the NFL. Good grief almighty. One day, the NFL will stand for something when it comes to integrity and character. You got to have something here, man, where you stand for something. Beating women? 8 games? Really? Okay, enough of that. Hey, our great friends at Morgan & Morgan, the #1 injury law firm in all of America for a reason, and it is because they win. I tell you this, folks, with over 30 years in the business, these folks have made sure that they defend families like yours across the country. Family in Pennsylvania that was initially offered $650K got nearly $30 million in settlement. Or the family in Florida that got offered $350K, they got nearly $12 million in settlement. Go forthepeople.com/Big Sills or Pound Law 529. That's forthepeople.com/Big Sills or Pound Law 529. And do me a favor, you tell them Big Sills sent you. We will talk to our friend JY. A lot of stuff going on in the WNBA and some NBA combo. We'll do that next here on SportsGrid. Very rarely do we get an opportunity to start on the floor when it comes to WNBA conversation, but now we get a chance. Pretty good matchup last night there, JY. I mean, you had two former number one overall selections go at each other there. And, Fever versus Wings last night, Clark versus Beckers. I mean, that's kind of what the NBA should be promoting and selling. No, it's a matchup what we saw last night.
Yeah, Big Sills, great to be on with you. This is the matchup that they need to be selling in the league, and you have the two premier guards, the two premier players in regards to popularity. Part of that because of the rivalry that goes back to when they were coming out. You got to remember that I think Caitlin Clark was number 4 in that high school class. I think, if I'm not mistaken, when Paige Beckers, Cameron Brink, Angel Reese, and then Caitlin Clark. These two have battled each other, obviously playing in the Final Four. So this is the matchup that we wanted, and this is what the WNBA needs to be focused on, is focusing on these matchups. And really, we got a great one last night. I think the thing that's really important for me that I got out of it, the most important stat, Big Sills, to me, is what? That's the number of turnovers that Caitlin Clark had last night. And I think that is something that has bothered her at times, is that turnover bug. But for her to shoot 11 of 18, didn't shoot the ball great from 3, but 10 assists, 1 turnover. That was fantastic basketball. And Paige Beckers as well. She only had 2 turnovers. So you have these guards that have high usage rates that don't turn the ball over, and match like this. These are the matchups that you want to see and play. But you also got to give a shout out to obviously Kelsey Mitchell. When Kelsey Mitchell and Caitlin Clark score in the 20s and they keep their turnovers down, especially with Aaliyah Boston, Big Sills, they can beat anybody in that league. They got to keep the turnovers down, that they shoot at a good clip, but a great performance offensively by the Indiana Fever, scoring 98 points.
Is Stephanie White the right coach for Caitlin Clark and for that Indiana Fever team?
I've seen Stephanie White coach in this league a long time. Got to remember, Big Sil, she's won a ring, and she's had a rough week. It started with the Carrington foul and almost Stephanie White in a weird way, like almost defending her, and then that turned the home crowd against you. You gotta be able to play the role of like a wrestling, like a babyface. You cannot, in a press conference, when it's Sophie Cunningham, almost defend the other team's player. Not with that fan base. Stephanie White, who's a veteran's got to be better. But shout out to Kelsey Mitchell and shout out to Caitlin Clark, because they kind of stepped up and defended Stephanie White. That was what I took away, is those players backed her up in the locker room. As long as they back her up, she's going to be good. But I'm going to say this. There's immense pressure on that team to win. They're only, I think they're only 1 game out of the loss column for 3rd, 3 games out of the loss column for 2nd. So let's see what kind of run they can make. But if they disappoint, could she be out of a job? And do you go to Toronto and say, give me Sandy Bordello as a coach, another veteran coach, someone that also Caitlin respects a lot? There was an interesting picture last year in New York when Sandy Bordello was a coach. And I think it was Bordello, Caitlin Clark, Anescu, and Stewie all huddled up. And I always have a mental note of the respect that Caitlin Clark has for Sandy Bordello.
So this WNBA task force, has it been embarrassing this week talking about this task force? Because, boy, I mean, you got to know what the W means in WNBA, don't you?
Yeah. And I think this is just another problem that the league has had, where they just don't focus on the right things. You know what the focus should be on the league? Last night. The focus should be on the matchups today. It should be about the stars, about Paige, about Caitlin Clark, about Kelsey Mitchell, right? About Brianna Stewart, about Asia Wilson, about Becky Hammond. It should be about the players. Keep it on the floor. That's all you got to worry about, Big Sills. And that's the problem with the league, is the league tries to be a league, but they try to be politically correct. They want to check all these boxes. You know what? Do yourself a favor. Check one box. Be great at basketball. That's all you got to worry about. And if you're great at basketball, people will continue to watch the league. Don't worry about all the task force and transgender and all this. Play great basketball, continue to get the ratings, and everything else will take care of itself.
Are the NBA owners embarrassed what's going on off the court? I mean, you know, the narrative and the conversation that you just mentioned. I mean, I wanted to start it off with Caitlin Clark and with Beckers because I watched that thing last night. I was entertained by it, and I want to see more stuff being talked about on the court. Has it become to an issue now where the NBA owners are now looking at it also with Adam Silver saying, hey, look here, we don't want to be all the things that you just mentioned. We don't want to go down looking like a political arm here for some sort of group. Do you believe right now the owners are starting to get embarrassed themselves and want to see the league? Or do they look at, like Jerry Jones says all the time, hey, any publicity is good publicity, and you're talking about the league. Do they look at it that way or the other way?
Both. You know what it is, Big Sills? Don't play with their money. That is all it comes down to. Don't play with their money. If the WNBA continues to have great ratings and people are glued in, whether it's for the basketball or all the other stuff, the league's finally making money right now, right? They're finally making money. So as long as they make money, the NBA owners are going to be fine. If this sideshow and all these other things going on, Big Sills, leads the league to be losing money and losing revenue and losing ad dollars, that's when you're going to have the issue. See, that's the interesting thing about Kathy Engelberg. She has done a great job with media rights and stuff like that in regards to the league. It's all the other things that she's not doing well, including, most importantly, her lack of communication and compassion for the players. That is what has become the issue with Kathy. If you look at the business sense, they've done a great job. Keep it about the sport. Keep it about hoops. Grow the game. And if you do that, the NBA owners will stay out of the way.
JY, do you think that Caitlin Clark has played herself into being one of the top 5 players in the game?
She absolutely is. Top 5, not even close.
We'll talk NBA next with our friend JY right here on SportsGrid. I'll tell you what, the NBA news cycle has been absolutely awesome in the offseason here. Usually it's mostly on trades, but we're going to get to the schedule here in a minute, and it is packed with people getting back together and some really entertaining ball games as we get into the holiday months. But first and foremost, with JY here, I want to start it off with Kevin Garnett. They're going to retire his jersey February 28th. The T-Wolves are. Legacy. What was Kevin Durant's legacy coming out of high school?
I mean, Kevin Durant's legacy, the big ticket. I have a funny story. Kevin Garnett and Tim Thomas are the only two people ever dunked on Coach. And this happened a long time ago when we were kids. Kevin Garnett he transcended the game. You got to remember, like, he was the first of that high school group, him and Kobe. They kind of started that in the mid late 90s, and his just transformation of his game, the way he played as a athletic, bouncy power forward who could score inside and out, handle a ball. He really transcended the game, and he finally got his ring, obviously with Boston. But what a player! And the one thing you could say about KG is KG was real. He told you how he felt. He played his what off every night, and he brought an intensity to any game he played, and that goes back to when we were young and we were all kids.
And he really changed the game a little bit because, am I right when I say this, JY? By the time he was 28, he had already worked on 3 max deals. And so the NBA owners are going like, hang on, this guy's 28 years old. Maybe we should put an age requirement back in the college game again, because all of a sudden he's getting paid, and he got paid handsomely, man. Obviously, like you said, that first deal that he got there with Kevin McHale there when Kevin McHale was running the T-Wolves. Let's go over to something that has gone on, and maybe hopefully after the Knicks win the championship here, that maybe this settles down a little bit. So Charles Oakley has his case thrown out by a judge that he said he was assaulted in 2017 when they asked him to leave and when they escorted him out of Madison Square Garden. Do you think James Dolan and him ever have and break bread again and really settle this dispute? Because how could you not have Oakley at an MSG game when the fact that they've won an NBA championship? Does it ever get settled?
It should. And I don't know who it's got to be. I really think it's got to be Patrick Ewing or someone to step in. But Oakley's had problems with Pat. Let's be honest, folks. This case has now been thrown out of court 3 times. And now MSG is talking about suing not Oakley, but Oakley's representatives and lawyers because of what's been going on. So to me, they just got to end it. It's important for them to end it. We need it ended. But to me, it's just one of those sad things for a franchise that's now climbed its way back and is NBA champions. They need to end it. I'm sick of seeing Charles Oakley in Cleveland. I'm sick of seeing Charles Oakley in San Antonio during the finals run and them showing him. I want to see Charles Oakley at the Garden. Charles Oakley needs to be at the Garden. I got one better. Charles Oakley number needs to be retired by the Knicks. That's what really needs to be happening. But before that happens, Big Sales, you're right. They got to break bread and have a little kumbaya moment for all us Knicks fans.
Absolutely here. The passing of Don Nelson, when he retired, he was the winningest coach in NBA history. I believe now he's second. And, I mean, his legacy, second winningest coach in NBA history, Don Nelson. I don't believe he ever won an NBA championship. Maybe one of the things that, people will look to that resume a little bit. But in your opinion, what does Don Nelson mean? And what was his name when it came to the high-ups of all-time coaches in NBA history?
Transformative offensively, good with Milwaukee, really good. I mean, folks, I'm 49 years old. So, if you're young, if you're in your 30s, go back and look at that run TMC team of Tim Hardaway, Mitch Richmond, and Chris Mullin. Even when they got Chris Webber in the 93 draft, that team was so ahead of its time offensively with the 3-point shot, the spacing of the floor, the attacking of the basket. Don Nelson doesn't get enough credit for what he did offensively for the game of basketball. He did a lot. A lot of people look at that short time he had with the Knicks. It didn't work. It ended up being for Jeff Van Gundy. But I remember Don Nelson, particularly his time with Golden State and that run TMC team.
Real quick, man. I mean, the NBA schedule came out. There's some really good games on here, and I don't know. I don't know if it's going to push the NFL at all during the holiday months, but JY, it's a pretty good looking schedule for some teams, especially a lot of Sixers.
Well, I tell you right now, Sixers Knicks, most team games on national TV. Sixers Knicks opening night. That's cinema with LeBron. Then obviously you have OKC in San Antonio. But then Christmas Day, you got that matchup in the middle between LeBron going back to LA with the Sixers. I'm telling you, Christmas Day is going to be the greatest pro sports day ever.
No doubt about it. JY, knocking it out of the park. We will talk to Super Bowl champion coach Mike Martz next here on SportsGrid. You know, one of my favorite coaches to talk football with is Mike Martz, former Super Bowl champion coach. And obviously, he's now in St. Louis there. And I've got to ask him flat out here, Coach, the NFL's got to somehow get back to St. Louis. It's just truly one of the great sports cities and one of the great NFL cities.
I think it's the best sports city in the country. When you look at baseball and hockey, and when football was here, I think unfortunately though, it's all about dollars. You know, when they moved the team out there, that club was worth $1 billion more than when it was here, and it's all TV money. And it's like Cincinnati, where it's located, just doesn't have the TV draw. But in terms of locally, they're going to show up for those games, boy.
Absolutely. Coach, I want to get into the quarterback play. I had Bernie Kosar on with me a couple months ago, and he said something that was really interesting. He said the technology of today's game, with everybody in the quarterback's ears and all, really doesn't help when it comes to developing of quarterbacks seeing the game or seeing and being able to dissect. Do you agree with that, Coach, that today the NFL quarterbacks coming out of college aren't ready to know how to play the game and how ready to dissect some of these defenses? Or do you think, again, these guys are just some of the most talented players that we've ever seen play the position? Where are you with this?
100% agree with him. And obviously, the more you throw the football, the better off you're going to be, hopefully. And I think college has done that for them, but they learned so many bad habits, and the speed of the game is just so different. You don't really see whether a young man can process quickly enough to be in the league. And I think that's the biggest downfall of so many talented kids. You know, when the game speeds up and everything is a little bit more technical, they just can't stay up and process as quickly as they need to. And this is one of the things that Kirk could do just instantly. God gave him that, and for whatever reason, he could draw on that constantly and get better at it. And there's so many really talented throwers out there and have great legs and all that just can't process as well.
Coach, who
But
do you like in today's game that you see right now that you think has all the intangibles that you would like to coach? Which one of these guys do you see in today's game?
I've always been a big fan of Justin Herbert. I think a couple of things have happened to him there. They've been bad on defense for so many years. They've gotten better, but their offensive line problems have survive behind that offensive line like he's been able to do and have the success he's had without much of a running game is pretty remarkable. It looks like they may be the surprise team of the league this year. I think what they've done with the new coordinator and defensively, they've shored things up and they run the ball. It's a perfect storm for them. I really have been a big fan of his since he came out of college. I think he's the whole package.
What do you make of Josh Allen and looking at Josh Allen's game?
I think Josh Allen would be my second pick. He's just a freak of nature. He's so big and fast, and he can run over two different linebackers in the same play, and yet throw these incredibly accurate balls with great force down the field, long range balls, and then touch it off. And I think that his decision making's improved. He takes less chances that puts the team in jeopardy. I think defensively they failed a little bit at inopportune times. The thing that frustrates me is when you have a quarterback like that, the first thing you got to do is surround him with some playmakers, give him an opportunity to, make plays with these guys. And if you don't have a real stable of wide receivers, which I don't think they have or haven't had anyway, it's really you've done an injustice to that team. The potential just won't be realized.
Coach, I want you to help me on one quarterback, Jalen Hurts. Tell me what you make of him. I look at his technique, I look at his fundamentals. I don't see the greatest footwork. I don't see the most accurate guy. He doesn't throw at times on time, but yet, coach, over the last 4 years, he's 50 and 18. He wins. I mean, explain to me what you see when you see Jalen Hurts.
Well, he's a great competitor, and here's a great example of a guy surrounded by talent as well. The offensive line, the run game for many years carried that team. The defensively, they were so strong. So he's had a cast around him that's really helped him. You put him in the Charger situation, flop quarterbacks, in the last few years, who knows what would happen. But I'm not taking a knock on him. I see all the things that you see. The thing that I don't like about him is he just has a tendency to hold the ball too much. He can do that because he can move around a little bit, but he's indecisive at times. If you play tight man against him, he's going to struggle because he's not inherently real accurate. But they just win, and that's the job of a quarterback is just to win. So it's hard to knock him because he's done such a great job with that team in terms of winning.
Absolutely, coach. Patrick Mahomes, coming off of an injury, coach, what would be the number one thing that you wanted to protect him from? And how would you gradually bring him back in? Or is that stuff off and you don't take that into any consideration? If he's ready to go, he's ready to go. Coming off that injury, how would you handle Patrick Mahomes?
I think if he's ready to go, he's ready to go. You don't worry about those things. You start to worry about, you put this unspoken thought in his head as well. He knows, you got to trust that he's ready to go, and you got to demonstrate that by how you deal with him too. So if he's ready, he's ready. I wouldn't blink.
Coach, you talk all the time about being on the same page with, your offensive line coach. Is that the most important coach for you? That when you're building a game plan each and every single week, is that guy the guy that you have to be in sequence with when it comes to protecting your quarterback, setting the protections, and also being involved in the run game? How important is that relationship when you're talking with your offensive line coach?
I think the offensive line coach is the most important hire on your staff. He's the first guy that I would look up and try to get the very best that there is. I think that your success as a football team starts in the offensive line, keeps the defense off the field, lets you throw it or run it at will, however you want. You look at the success Detroit's had because they've had a great offensive line. And of course, Danny's a great head coach. But as you look at the teams throughout the league that have a great offensive line, those guys generally are going to be in the playoffs. And when you see Tunsil and some of those guys, the left tackle at the Commanders go down, the center now at Mays at Detroit, those are going to be issues. The great offensive line give you a position to be a champion. And it's just, in my mind, that's just in granite.
Coach, when you see a guy like Matthew Stafford come from a situation in Detroit and he gets around Sean McVay, what's different from Matthew Stafford, Detroit, with Matthew Stafford in Los Angeles? Is it just talent? Because let's not forget, in Detroit, he did have Megatron up there. Didn't have the running game that they probably have better in Los Angeles. But what's the difference between Stafford, Detroit, Stafford, LA?
It's a perfect storm. Of course, McVay, he's just a terrific coach. And I think the opportunities and the creativity is a great match for him. I don't know if there's anything that Stafford can't do. I think when Stafford was at Detroit, I think they had a poor coaching staff. And I hate to say that, but it happens in the league when you get a great talent like that. And then let's just say he stays with Danny Campbell. How good would he be? Who knows? But LA, they've got such a great staff, and obviously you look at all the coaches that have been there now with him and gone on great success. It's hard to believe that such a young football coach can be so dynamic and creative at this early in his career, and I think it's just a perfect storm. It really is, and I think it's really prolonged Stafford's career.
Absolutely. Coach, do you think the one thing, though, that Detroit and maybe the years now in Los Angeles, you got to get a strong running game like you had there with – I think everybody was under the notion that you guys were the greatest show on turf of all time. But at the end of the day, you guys were just a great run team, too, with Marshall.
We were always a top 5 rushing team, and I think that that goes back to the offensive line comment that we were talking about a minute ago, Dan. I think it goes hand in hand, of course. You have to be willing to run the football. And to think that you have a great back and you're just going to do well running the football, it just doesn't work. It's like having a great quarterback with no receivers and protection, those kinds of things. There's a marriage there that makes it all work. And I think the commitment with a great offensive line and a back like in Detroit, Jahmyr Gibbs was a guy that I just love coming out. And, you put him in an offense that's creative rushing wise, and, it's awesome.
We're going to continue our conversation with Mike Martz. How tough was that decision to go with Kurt Warner? We'll do that next on SportsGrid.
I know you didn't. Talk!
I'm innocent. Got the wrong guy. It wasn't me. I didn't do anything. Okay, it was me. I did it.
Bringing an owl to an interrogation? That's a power move.
Every time. Yeah.
Hiring America's largest injury law firm for your injury? That's also a power move. Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm.
Man, we're continuing our conversation with Super Bowl champion Coach Mike Martz here. And Coach, I want you to go back and tell the folks how tough that decision was with you and Dick Vermeil when that whole scenario came out. Trent Green gets injured in the exhibition season. How many times did you guys have to go around the table before you gave a guy who was basically a journeyman who had been cut numerous times in numerous places to get sold on Kurt Warner? How many times around the table did you have to go?
So it was, really the end of spring before we broke for summer. Dick had a staff meeting in his movie. It's just the opposite of what happened. Everybody wanted to bring another quarterback in, a veteran quarterback, and Mike White was fighting for it. And of course, Mike and Dick are close, but Dick made it clear that would be my decision. He was good with that. And so the last question before we broke, he said, is Kurt good enough to be a starter? Is he our number 2, or do we need to go out and get Jeff Hostetler, which is who everybody wanted to bring in? And I'd seen enough of him, and put enough pressure on him in the spring. By that point, I said, I don't know how good he's going to be, but he's good enough to start for us. And we're going to be a real good football team. The one thing I knew about Kurt, he's going to try and do everything just the way you want him to do it. And the one thing that was his processing was really, really different, unusual. So it was all there. It was just, we just got to get him ready. I just didn't have any issues with Kurt at all. Like I said, I didn't know how good he'd be, but he was trying to do everything the way we wanted to do. Fast forward to the fall. We'd gone through camp. He'd had a good camp. I put a lot of pressure on him to see if he could handle it, and he did. And so when this happened, it wasn't really, oh no, what are we going to do now? We all felt, and Dick at that point did too, that Kurt was the guy, and we're not concerned about that. But Trent Green was such an unusual personality and such a great human being that we were all devastated for him, because this was going to be such a great year for him. And so that's where all of our emotions were for about a day. And then we got Kurt in there, we got him ready, and off we went, But, to see that transition wasn't an issue for us. We just felt like he'd be good. We didn't know how good he'd be, obviously, but we felt like he was going to be good enough.
Coach, when you're in that booth, and when did that light click and you went, okay, this might be special? Was it like the early part, the first quarter of the season? Was it right away, or was it a gradual that you guys went, I think we got something special here going on with this quarterback and with this group of men?
Well, for the team itself, it was in minicamp in the spring. We were really good on defense, and defense just used to own the offense there. And we got going on offense and had success in minicamp against our defense. And there was a different feeling then. There's a groundswell, so to speak. But in that first game against Baltimore, Kurt threw 3 picks, I think, in the first half. None of those picks were his fault. One was a bad play designed by me. One was a tip ball bounced off of Marshall's shoulder pad. Nothing was his fault, and he didn't blink. He came back in the second half, and the hardest thing for any quarterback to do after those picks, whether they're his fault or not, is to come back and play well. And he came back in the second half and was exceptional. So I think at that point, the emotional thing of throwing interceptions is hard on guys. But to come back and play just perfect football in that second half, then you kind of knew that we might have something there. And, of course, he just got better and better every week.
He surely did, and it was an incredible run to a Super Bowl championship that year. Torrey Holt, Coach, his name gets brought up all the time now for Hall of Fame consideration. I looked at the numbers between Andre Reed, and no shade and no disrespect to Andre Reed at all, but I look at Torrey Holt's numbers and I go, what am I missing here, Coach? 7-time Pro Bowler. I mean, he's got the numbers. He's got over 1,000 receptions. I mean, the guy's got everything that you need. What's the holdup, in your opinion, because him not being in the Pro Football Hall of Fame?
Well, he's the fastest guy to 10,000 yards in the history of the league. He's had 6 1,300-yard seasons. Nobody's ever done that consecutively. He's done things that nobody's even come close to doing. It's a political thing. The 3 guys that kind of run that committee or head it up have said that we've got too many guys from that offense in the Hall of Fame. They've made that comment a couple of times, which just irks me. And Peter King, for some reason, has blasted Torrey and says he doesn't belong in the Hall of Fame. Why or how, I'd like to talk to Peter about this. What's that based on? It can't be based. Here's the thing that bothers me the most. They say, well, you're on this team with all this talent. Well, that's even makes it even harder because if you're throwing the ball to Oz and to, Isaac Bruce and Marshall Falk, then there's less opportunities for you. So to stand out with all that other talent is pretty remarkable. To me, it's an argument that he should be in, but it's probably the biggest travesty in all of football right now that he's not in the Hall of Fame.
Wow, that's a great comment there. Marshall Falk, how important, Coach, was Marshall Falk to the engine of the greatest show on turf?
Well, he was the greatest show on turf. Without him, we're a good team, but we're not a great team. And you go back and look at the plays that he made at key moments for us to win games. The NFC Championship against Philadelphia is a great example. We come out in the second half and hand him the ball 22 times. He gets 2 touchdowns, and we went to go to the Super Bowl. So he could put the team on his back at times, and he'd answer. I think he's the primary reason we were such a dynamic offense and such a good football team.
Couple questions, Coach, here for you on today's play callers. What makes a great NFL offensive play caller, in your opinion?
The best play callers are those guys that can adapt during the game. I see so many system coordinators out there that they know this system and they go run it because maybe that's what they ran in college or that's all they know. You guys 32, 33 years old, which makes Sean McVay so unusual because he's not like that. They run that system, something changes out there, and they just keep doing the same stuff over and over. And it's ignorant, and they don't know any better. Their exposure is so limited to the amount of football. And I think the great ones like Ben Johnson, they can take what's happened in the middle of a game and they can change gears immediately and go do something else. I've seen him win games at Ben Johnson when he's at Detroit where they didn't throw a pass in the last 8 minutes of the game. They just pounded it. And it still went down, scored, and iced it. Or they got to come back and do 2 minutes. Whatever it is, they're what they can do, and they're prepared to do whatever it takes to win and not just run a system because that's what they know. And I think that's a primary difference between the good ones.
Boy, Coach, you mentioned Ben Johnson there real quick here. I mean, he had Jared Goff the following year. He gets Caleb Williams, and it's a completely different offense. And probably the versatility is what you love about him in that coordinator there. Coach, I appreciate you coming aboard here, man. I mean, I think it's going to be an interesting football season this year, and I'm with you. I'm actually going with Justin Herbert as my preseason pick for MVP based on Coach Martz. Thank you, Coach. Sileo says next here on SportsGrid. funny situation going on in Philadelphia this past week when it came to the starting quarterback, Jalen Hurts. So the Eagle PR department, not knowingly, decided to put a video out, an innocuous video, when it came to throwing an interception during a practice. Now, look, how many times do quarterbacks throw a football during any given training camp? 1,000? But here's a quarterback that's under incredible pressure this year to excel with this new offense that they're trying to install there in Philly. So what does the PR people do? What do? At the end of the day, guess what? They put a video out that nearly 17 million people viewed watching Jalen Hurts throw an interception. And you sit there and you go, what's the big deal? Everybody is watching this year to see whether or not if Jalen Hurts is going to earn that new contract. They offered a contract to the Philadelphia Eagles a couple of years. They turned it down. The Eagles did not want to talk contract with Jalen Hurts because they wanted to see what he's going to do this coming season in the new offense. So you put a video out where it shows that the guy's throwing picks. Everybody knows. Look, for me, it's not a big deal, but people are making narratives. Guy's not accurate. You just heard Coach Martz, what he just said about Jalen Hurts. He's not the most accurate guy on the planet. That's the narrative out on the guy. He's not a very good passer. So the PR department of the Eagles thought that they were really highlighting Quinyon Mitchell getting the interception, not knowing that they were throwing shade on Jalen Hurts. Again, remember something. We're going to look at things and things are going to land different. The quarterback goes into the 2026 season with an incredible resume, and yet people are saying in Philadelphia, if Hurts does not have a great season, the Eagles are going to move on from the quarterback, and they're going to go in a different direction. If they were really sold on Jalen Hurts, they would have given him a contract extension this past offseason. Well, that's not the case because they're not sold themselves. They just gave Jalen Carter a contract extension, and they try to get ahead of the game. That's what Howie Roseman does, the general manager. He wants to get ahead of the game, and he wants to make sure that he's not going against the market and setting the market with what the quarterback prices are going to be. You're talking in excess of $63 million if Jalen Hurts gets a new contract extension. You're not going to go into a contract talk with Nicole Lynn from Clutch Sports, his agent, and say, we're going to pay you $3 million more than what you're making right now. And the video, again, it shows. And here's the video. And get this, it's a random video of a practice that got 17 million views. People out there are also saying this about Hurts. He's a caboose. He's been carried. That leads into the narrative. That leads into that. Look, the PR department for the Eagles, in my opinion, didn't really go out and try to do anything and try to create any kind of controversy for Hurts. They thought they were accentuating Quinyon Mitchell and him being able to get an interception. Vic Fangio had talked the day previous about how he doesn't have an interception during the regular season yet, and that he's still a virgin getting an interception in a presser. Those were Vic Fangio's words. So he was excited about it. The Eagles were excited about it. Look, Jalen Hurts has become one of the more polarizing players in the NFL. You know, he's won a ton of football games. He's not the sexiest looking quarterback that plays in the pocket. His resume really does speak for itself. Even for a naysayer like myself, you can't get away from the last 4 years. 50-18, 2 Super Bowl appearances, a Super Bowl MVP. It almost sounds like the old Skip Bayless and LeBron James conversation that the guy does not have what it takes to be a champion. That's not the case here. That's not where we're going. I think Howie Roseman does a spectacular job at building that roster and putting great football players on that team. That team is loaded once again, but now the direction of the football team, they want Jalen Hurts this year to now run the Green Bay offense. Sean Mannion, the new offensive coordinator, has been brought in to overhaul the entire offense, and they want more production out of the offense. Look, in the last 5 years, 27th in passing, 18th in passing, 8th in passing, 29th in passing, and this past year, they were 23rd in passing. For an offense that spends over $230 million a year in salaries, it's time to get the quarterback to elevate himself and that unit on being a balanced football team. For years, that they've been leaning, without a doubt, on that run game. Well, this year, they're going to have to lean on that pass game if they're going to want to make it to the NFC Championship game. And Jalen Hurts, come next March, getting a new contract. We shall see. Not thinking they meant any harm. 17 million people witnessed it. Hour number 2, right here on SportsGrid. You know, Jerry Jones loves to change and reshape history, and he's trying to do it again. Let's put context to what we're saying here. Well, forever, he has tried to take credit for the Herschel Walker trade that Jimmy Johnson constructed that turned the Dallas Cowboys into one of the most dominant franchises in the early 90s and one of the greatest Super Bowl runs of all time. Jimmy goes in and makes the Herschel Walker trade on the legendary run that he had with his coaches. One day, Jimmy Johnson was talking with Dave Wanstead, his D coordinator, and the football team was just not a very good football team and didn't have a lot of talent when he came and became the head football coach. He said, you know what? We've got to trade Herschel Walker, and we've got to get assets in here, and we've got to get players in here. Everyone knows the history. Jimmy goes out, makes a trade with Minnesota, and goes on to deliver one of the greatest trades in NFL history, rebuilding and reshaping the Dallas Cowboys. Jerry Jones, at the time, the owner of the team, was fixing the business side of it, and Jimmy had complete autonomy when it came to running the football team and the football organization. Every decision that was made during that Super Bowl time was made through Jimmy Johnson. Jimmy Johnson was the one hiring the coaches. Jimmy Johnson was the one that was changing and reshaping, as I said, the roster. And that's what made that 3-time Super Bowl champion football team one of the greatest teams of all time. Well, fast forward. He's now at training camp in Oxnard saying the Micah Parsons trade is on the same level as the Herschel Walker trade. First things first, dude. That trade delivered Super Bowls. The Herschel Walker trade reshaped the entire franchise. The Herschel Walker trade was done strategically on being able to build both sides of the football. When you're looking at what Jerry Jones has done and how he tries reshaping, Jerry will tell you that he was part of the Charles Haley trade and that it was important to him that Charles Haley became a Dallas Cowboy. How that whole story worked out was there was a disgruntled player, Charles Haley. He did not like George Seifert. They got on the phone, and the general manager of the team, Carmen Policy, called Bob Ackles and said, we'd like to trade him to the Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys were not one of the better teams yet because they were coming off the 1-15 team. And he went to Jimmy Johnson and said, we can get Charles Haley if you want. And Jimmy said, sign him. That was all Jimmy. That wasn't Jerry Jones making that deal. It was Jimmy Johnson making that deal to get Charles Haley. And now the Micah Parsons deal, he's trying to reshape, saying this is in the same line of the Herschel Walker deal. Jerry doesn't get it. You got to win championships, dude. In the last 30 years, the Dallas Cowboys have 4 playoff wins. 4. The New York Jets have more. The Arizona Cardinals have more. The Jacksonville Jaguars have more playoff wins since 2000. Jerry first has to get that football team back into not only into a Super Bowl, but into a conference championship. It's been 30 years. All the players that Jerry Jones has replaced, let's look at them. Troy Aikman, Michael Irvin, Emmitt Smith. He's been able to replace them with really good ball players. Tony Romo, Dak Prescott, Ezekiel Elliott, Des Bryant, CeeDee Lamb. What's been the one common denominator that Jerry has not been able to replace? It's simple. It's been Jimmy Johnson, the one football guy in the room that made things and moved the needle for Jerry Jones on that football field. Jerry Jones will go down as the worst general manager in NFL history, and somehow he's a pro football Hall of Famer. Based on what? Jerry is a great businessman. A football man? Show me where a general manager keeps the job for 30 years, having only 4 playoff wins. You know, you try to make the comparisons to Al Davis. Al Davis was a former coach of the year. Al Davis was a guy who was a revolutionary guy when it came to talent evaluation. He knew players. He knew how to bring guys in, and he also knew how to bring a young coach in by the name of John Madden. Then he would bring another young coach in by the name of John Gruden. Look, you're not comparing Jimmy Johnson to anyone else. At the end of the day, you've got to look at the scenario here where you've got to look at Jimmy and you've got to say, I've never been able to replace him. Jerry Jones has never been able to replace Jimmy Johnson. And now he sits there with all the media around him and telling people, we've got a Micah Parsons deal that resembles the Herschel Walker deal. The Herschel Walker deal is clearly one of the greatest deals and one of the greatest moves in pro football history. One of the great sidebars to that story was every single player that Jimmy Johnson traded for with Minnesota, not one of those players ever played it down for the Dallas Cowboys. Because back in the day, when you made trades like that and you didn't use the player, they would go into being draft picks. Jimmy didn't want the players from the Vikings. Jimmy wanted the draft picks. 54 trades were made during that time. And Jimmy was the head coach for 5 years. 54 trades. He doubled the league. Nobody at the time was trading football players. The National Football League never really believed in doing trades. They believed in doing all their work in the offseason. That wasn't Jimmy's way. That's how he built that Dallas Cowboy dynasty. Jerry will go down. Listen, I love the family. I think Jerry is one of the absolute best people on the planet when it comes to building a football team, when it comes to the business side. All right. I'll tell you what, folks. I've been looking forward to this guy. And I've been looking forward to my friend here. Here he is here, folks, the greatness. And one day we're going to be saying Hall of Famer, my friend Lomas Brown. How you doing, Lo?
Man, I'm great, Dan. It is so good seeing you and so good seeing the success, my brother. I'm so happy about the success that you are having.
Thank you so much, man. 26 Lions will be what to Lomas Brown?
Ooh, we have to be, to me, the Super Bowl, at least a Super Bowl participant. I'm serious, Dan. I just think the window is the next 2 years for the Lions. With some of the salaries we have, with the talent we have on the team, with the coaching staff we have. Everything is lined up. The schedule, a fourth place schedule. So we have a lighter schedule than we had last year. So it's so important, I think, for us to get into the Super Bowl either this year or next year. I'm sorry, I meant to say the fourth easiest schedule in the league. So we seen what New England was able to do last year with a easier schedule. So I think we have more talent here in Detroit than New England has. So I'm definitely looking for the Lions to get to the Super Bowl in the next year or two.
Hey, Lo, Jahmyr Gibbs gets his contract. You played with Barry Sanders. Are there any similarities between both these players?
I think the biggest thing for me is the vision, the way these guys can set up blocks. I mean, it's amazing how these guys are able to just, like I say, set their blocks up with their vision. And, with Jahmyr, I think he's gotten better running between the tackles. And that's what I'm more impressed with how he's evolved his game. Of course, we know both of those guys, Barry and Jahmyr, could take it the distance when they had to do it. And we know that they were a threat each and every play to get the ball. But I just think the vision that those guys shared is the one thing that kind of jumps out at me, Dan.
Absolutely. Here we're going to continue our conversation with Lomas Brown here. My great friends at Morgan & Morgan, the #1 injury law firm in all of America for a reason, folks. They win. Go to forthepeople.com/big sales or pound law 529. That's forthepeople.com/big sales or pound law 529. And do me a favor. You tell them Big Sales sent you. We're going to continue our conversation with Big Lomas Brown here next, right here on SportsGrid. Man, I've known this man since I was 19 years old, and he was at Florida, and I was at the University of Miami. We were teammates
Yep.
a little bit for my cup of coffee there with the Detroit Lions. And Lo, I think one day, man, we're going to be saying Hall of Famer. I mean, you're on the ballot again. I mean, 20 years, I believe everyone believes that you should be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. That honor will come one day to you. And what will that mean to you when that honor does come to you? Because I do believe it's coming to you.
Man, everything. It would be the pinnacle. It really would be the pinnacle for me in my football career if I could get to the Hall of Fame. You know, it was a semifinalist last year. And the one thing, Dan, I have to do, I have to thank the Lions for the push that they made the last couple of years for me. It's been great. Shillaham Ford, Rod Woods, just everybody over the media team, the PR team, they've just done such a great job. And, you know, as we know, you know, it takes a little longer for us offensive linemen to get in there because we don't have the stats like everybody else has. But, you know, I got the opportunity to block for, I think, the greatest running back to play in the game in Barry Sanders. So, you know, to me, like I say, if I could get there, Dan, it would be the pinnacle of my football career.
Am I right when I say this, Lomas, that there's been like a facelift for the entire organization? Like it's a different run organization compared to what it's been. It was when you were there, they won, but again, it's been spotty winning like since the 60s. And all of a sudden now I see more consistency. Am I right when I say that there's been a facelift there with the Lions in the front
without
office?
a doubt. Without a doubt, Dan. Like I said, back then when we were on the team, we won in spite of, you know, the higher ups, you know. But now with Shillaham Ford taking over, all of them work in unison. The top office, you know, the players, the coaches, it's all lined up. And I can't say it was always that way for us when we were there. So she's done such a great job of, just like you say, turning that whole organization around. And Dan Campbell has done such a great job of turning this community, this state around, because everybody believes in him. Everybody believes in what he's trying to do. And you can see it, that grit that they talk about, you can see it throughout the city, how the city has just revitalized itself too, how it's come along. I don't know when the last time you've been here, Dan, but it's completely different from when you were here before, the city of Detroit. So I think a lot of that is tied in with the Lions, the success the Lions have had too over the last few years.
I call Dan Campbell the NFL's version of Hulk Hogan. He
Yeah.
reminds me of like Hulk Hogan in the way that he runs the football team. It really does look like the players really enjoy playing for him.
They do. I mean, he's a football guy, as you know, played the game for 8, 9 years. So, you know, as a player, you respect somebody that's leading you, that's actually been in that locker room, that's actually sat in those seats and done what you've done. You can respect them a lot more. And that's how Dan Campbell came in. The coaching staff that he surrounds himself with is just a lot of ex-players that played at a high level in this game. So, yes, we've embraced him. Like I say, this city is full of grit. And it's not just us, Dan. It's permeated to the Pistons, the Tigers, the Red Wings. Anytime you hear those coaches and managers talk, they're using words grit and resilience. And all that, like I say, that started with Dan Campbell. So I'm proud of him, man, because it's almost like, you know, we played together. So I feel like a proud father when I see him have success.
I love that there. You know, I got to say this about Jared Goff. I thought he was going to be a stopgap quarterback for you guys when they ended up sending him up to Detroit. Lo and behold, he gets a $53 million contract extension. He's winning football games like nobody's business up there in Detroit. Have you been surprised with his success, Lo, as a starting quarterback there?
I've been surprised at the adjustment he has made. And the reason why I'm saying that, Dan, think about this. He grew up in California. He played high school, college, and pro ball in California. Then you get ostracized and sent out of California and sent to the Midwest, right? To an organization that has never won, never won on the highest level, and have had struggles. You send him there and you want him to turn around not only the team, but you want him to turn around the organization, how the people in the community think about the Detroit Lions. And he's come in and he's done it all. He's been a godsend for this team, this community, man. Jared, I'm so proud of Jared and what he's done. And I think what he's going to do for us, I really think under Jared, we could realize our dreams and get to a Super Bowl because he's been there. He's been to a Super Bowl before, so he knows how to lead us to that. So I'm just so happy for the success he's had. I'm glad the Lions are taking care of him. He's one of ours. We wrap our arms around Jared Goff as a community, and he's ours. So I'm just so happy he's here, and I'm so happy he's having success here.
I want to take you into the division. A couple last questions here for you, Lo. Have you been surprised with the success of Ben Johnson in Chicago?
No, because I called that guy when he was here. I used his nickname for me was the Savant. And you know what that means? That means a genius in whatever you do. And I think he is a savant. I think Ben Johnson is a genius. His offenses are the most creative offenses that I've ever been around, man. So it was fun to watch him for the years he was here. And no, I'm not shocked at the success he's having in Chicago.
Do you believe it's the toughest division in football, the NFC North?
I do. I might think that the NFC West when San Fran, you talk about Seattle, LA, you talk about those teams. I think right now might have us. But I would say this, if they're 1A, we're 1B.
Got to show you this, Lo. Here's one of my Detroit Lion checks here. Let me see it going over here.
Oh, my goodness. Yes, I can. Wow.
There's one of my old Detroit Lion checks there. Lomas, thank you, man. I appreciate you very much, and I love the hell out of you, man. Thank you, Lo.
Love you, Dan.
I like my producer Robert's title for this segment, Sileo Sideline Scoop. What's going on so far during the exhibition season? On Thursday and Friday, we'll see what happens in today's games, but there were some things that are noteworthy that are coming out of these exhibition games. Most notably, I liked the way that Fernando Mendoza played and directed the Raider offense. You know, it's going to be, I think, a gigantic hit for the Raiders or a gigantic bust for the Raiders. I still don't know what I'm looking at with Fernando Mendoza. Watched him against that Cardinal football team, and I thought he had great command of the huddle. I thought he was on time. I thought he took a couple hits in the pocket. I was pretty impressed with him. Fernando Mendoza's first preseason game, 10 of 16, 97 yards. And as I said, I thought he had command of the offense. And I do believe that you got one of the better play callers in the NFL with Clint Kubiak. And I think he's going to be a major factor in the development of this player. Not only that, who better to go to than one of the executives that there with the Raiders, and that's Tom Brady. How to see the game, how to prep for the game, how to understand defenses, how to understand how to dissect defenses, pre-snap reads, all of that. I'm a gigantic fan of Fernando Mendoza. Funny, you know, I didn't realize that he was following me on social media. And for about 3 years, he's been following me on social media. And I didn't know he was. And this is when he was a high school student at Columbus High School down in South Florida. Hey, Dan, can you do me a favor? I've been offered a preferred walk-on scholarship by Manny Diaz. Do you think you could put a word in for me? I never read it. What happens? He ends up going to Cal. He ends up performing well there. And then obviously he ends up going to Indiana and beating my Miami Hurricanes in the national championship game this past season. And who would have known if I would have been able to see that text message and that message that was sent to me. We've become better friends now, and I'm really pulling for him to see what he's going to become in the National Football League. I really do think that there's great things ahead for him because I think he's a tremendous leader. The other stories on the other side, Tagovailoa. Man, I'll tell you what. Tua Tagovailoa has been really an enigma. Here's a guy that can throw the football. Here's a guy that understands how to throw the football. Here's a guy that gets it. Just did not play well in that exhibition game against the Denver Broncos. He even said so after. And when you get that kind of talent on that football team, to me, I think the Atlanta Falcons are a quarterback away from actually winning the NFC South. Michael Penix is not the guy. He is not. But I will say that Tagovailoa, if given the opportunity, I think can be the guy. But he's got to play well. There's just no mistaking it that he has got to turn his career back around again. Look, he had every opportunity in Miami. They gave him the contract. And this has just been a miserable 5 years for Tua Tagovailoa. Will he turn his career around? Kevin Stefanski, the new head coach, came over from Cleveland, two-time NFL Coach of the Year. We'll give him that opportunity. I think if Tua could straighten it out, that football team could go on and win the NFC South. The New York Jets. Where do I begin? So I watched that thing the other day. Bucks and Jets. And I'll tell you, that's some of the worst football I've seen in a long time by both football teams. Now, I'll give the Buccaneers a pass with the fact that the Bucks didn't play their starters. But the Jets? All right, I've said this before. It's the worst roster, and I do mean the worst roster in football. How are they going to move the sticks? Look, Frank Wright is a dear friend of mine. He's a former teammate of mine. I think Frank is going to do great things for Geno Smith. Geno has an ankle injury, and we'll see what that offense is going to look like this year. There's a lot of people that are saying that the offense may actually surprise some people this year and be an offense that's going to move the chains and being able to put points up on the board. They've got a great running back. They've got a wide receiver. But again, on the defensive side of the football, that's going to be the biggest question mark along with that offensive line. The Jets have to go back to the basics. You need to build the football team from the inside out. not from the outside in. Because you've got a good running back in Hall, and because you've got a great wide receiver, that's not going to be a remedy on how you build a championship football team. Look at what the Philadelphia Eagles do each and every single draft. They build from inside. They build in the lines. Look at how much money they've spent in their offensive line, and look at what they've just recently done the last 2 years with Jalen Carter and with Jordan Davis. They spent over $60 million on two people when it came to fortifying the defensive fronts. That's got to change in New York. Speaking of New York, Mr. New York, we're going to talk to our friend from WFAN, Craig Carton, here on SportsGrid. Man, one of my favorite sports talk hosts ever, and I say that very seldom, is Craig Carton, Mr. New York right now. He's just absolutely killing it on WFAN in the afternoons. Make sure you check him out. He joins us now here. And I'm going to start it out with you, Craig, here with your New York Jets here, man. I mean, what are you expecting from this Jets team this year, huh?
17-0, is that on the table? Here's what I expect, because that ain't gonna happen. I think they're gonna be competent. I think the New York Jets offense is going to be much better than any offense we've seen out of them for a very long time. And I think there's the possibility that, they're a 7 or 8 win team. It all comes down, like if it does for every other team, how good is Geno Smith? Last year's Geno Smith, this team wins 3 games. If you get the Seattle Geno Smith, we win 7 or 8 games. But I think as much as we all want to make fun of the Jets, I'm down with that also. If you look at the offensive weapons they have, this is going to be a good offense. Now, the defense, I think, is going to struggle. But the New York Jets offense is going to be good. They're going to score points this year.
Do you think one of the major additions has been your friend and my friend, Frank Reich? How important do you think he is to what the Jets are going to try to accomplish? Look at what he did when he was with Philadelphia. I mean, he's been around everyone. Yeah. And especially with veteran quarterbacks, he's really good. You think that's a big addition to them and why you have optimism?
I'm not the biggest Frank Reich's the savior guy, but Frank Reich, again, I'm going to use this word a lot today, I guess. Frank Reich represents competency. We haven't had that in a very, very long time. And while I don't think Frank Reich is the greatest offensive mind of all time. I think Frank Reich, having played, having coached, having been a coordinator, is right for Geno Smith. He's right for this team. And I think it's going to be an upgrade. Again, look, I was at practice this past week on Tuesday. Geno Smith's got a howitzer for an arm. He can still make every single throw. The question is up here. He's going to take chances. Last year, Justin Fields, the Jets gave up 60 sacks last year. And everyone's like, oh, your offensive line stinks. That's not right. Justin Fields couldn't let the ball go. He was afraid to throw the ball more than 5 or 10 yards down the field. Geno Smith doesn't have that gene. Geno Smith has no problem uncorking one down the field. Hopefully more of those go to our team than the other team. But Frank Reich, to answer your initial question, represents competency and an upgrade for sure from what we had last year. The Jets are going to be a fun offense to watch.
Aaron Glenn, where are you on him? Last year, a punchline. Where do you think you think a year maturing as a head football coach and understanding his role better this year will make him a better head football coach this year?
Look, he can't be worse, right? So I think if you go by that, by default, I think he's going to be better, having a year under his belt. I spent a half hour with Aaron Glenn and came on our show on Tuesday. What I like about Aaron Glenn is that he takes ownership of the mistakes he made. What I don't like about Aaron Glenn is that he hasn't proven yet that he's a good game day coach. End of the first half, end of the second half. Do you make the right calls? Do you put your team in the best position? I think defensively, him calling the defense should help because that's how he got the job as the Lions, defensive coordinator. I'm not sold on him yet as a really good head coach. And I think there's a reason he's right now, odds-wise, the favorite to be the first coach fired. But I can tell you this, having sat across a desk from him and looked him in the eye man to man, what I do like about Aaron Glenn is he takes full ownership of what he did wrong. He's not a finger pointer. He's not saying, well, my middle linebacker stunk. My safety wasn't any good. He took ownership of the fact that he did a bad job last year. And I know it seems like a silly thing. We're talking about adults, and in this case, a guy making like $5 million a year. But there's something to be said about a head coach that owns his mistakes and doesn't blame everybody else around him. So again, I don't know if he's any good. I'd probably lean against it, but he can't be worse than he was last year. And this team's not going to be as bad as they were last year.
Craig, I want to take it to the other New York team. And you know what? I don't know where you stand on this with, I don't know where you stand with the quarterback, Jackson Dart. I got to tell you, I don't see it, dude. I mean, I think the guy's constantly in the tent. The guy doesn't really know how to play the position. He's too reckless out there. Yet I hear everybody in New York love the guy. And
well, they're desperate.
I don't know.
Right?
Maybe you think I'm wrong.
No, I lean more towards you than really positive Giant fans that hope this kid is the second coming. So therefore, they believe he's the second coming. Look, Jackson Dart showed some good things last year. We have to acknowledge that. His touchdown interception rate was 3-1. That's awesome. He obviously didn't play the entire season as Russell Wilson got the start. The issues with Jackson Dart to me are he's living the life of a guy that has already won 3 Super Bowls and is Patrick Mahomes. He loves the stardom of being the starting quarterback for the New York Giants. Now you have to put up or shut up. I think he's a good quarterback. I think he has a chance to be a very good quarterback, but I haven't seen it yet. So I'm closer to you than I am, diehard Giant fans that have built in this, based on hope, this notion that he's already a rock star. I think he has a chance to be a very good quarterback, but he's had a tough training camp, according to the guys that were in West Virginia covering the Giants this year. Their wide receiving core stinks. Let's just be honest about that. And I don't think they have a great running game. And John Harbaugh is going to want to run the football. That's what he does. That's why they brought Ricard in, to be a lead fullback. They're going to try to run the hell out of the ball and then ask Jackson Dart to make some plays. I think he is a good quarterback, but I do not think the jury's come back and acknowledge that he's a 10-year franchise quarterback for this team yet. No.
You know, I would ask you this. Eli Manning knew how to play in New York. Do you think it comes down to that, Craig? You got to learn how to play in New York. It's not like playing anywhere else. You know what I mean? You play in New York, you got to handle New York and New York media and the New York fan base. I mean, is that an issue you think he's struggling with a little bit?
No, I think, look, you have a good-looking girlfriend who's on Instagram and all that. You're a good-looking kid yourself. You don't say no to any opportunities because New York offers a lot of them. I don't think New York's too big for him. I also think we've sometimes canonized Eli Manning as one of the greatest quarterbacks we've ever seen. And I like Eli, and he's had 2 of the greatest postseason runs for sure we've ever seen. But nobody wants to take a look at Eli Manning as a regular season quarterback. He was average. So what Eli did, which was really smart, he stayed out of all the limelight. He played football, and it wasn't very good in the regular season a lot of those years. And then when the playoffs hit, you have 2 of the greatest playoff runs of all time. But Eli wasn't out there all the time taking advantage of all the things New York offers. Jackson Dart already has.
In your eyes, is Eli Manning a Hall of Fame quarterback?
I hate that question because he is going to be in the Hall of Fame, whether it's, the next year, the year after that. There's no doubt in my mind he's going to be in the Hall of Fame. He's a 2-time Super Bowl MVP, and that's why he's in the Hall of Fame. If you could separate it and say, as a regular season quarterback, is he a Hall of Famer? The answer is no. But when you take the entire body of work, he's getting in the Hall of Fame.
Sounds like you just had to sell yourself on it there a little bit.
Well, I've come to terms. Here's the deal. I've talked about this a million times on the radio. By the way, there are guys that get into the Hall of Fame in every sport where I don't think they're Hall of Famers, but I don't begrudge them the fact that they got in. Like, I don't think Amari Stoudemire should be a basketball Hall of Famer. He is. So good for him. Eli Manning is getting in the Hall of Fame. We can debate the methodology of how he's getting in, but he's getting in. Is that an easy answer? Is that a political answer?
I think so there. Speaking of some basketball here, I can't wait to talk to Craigie in the next block here about LeBron James going to the Sixers. Holy cow. The Sixers and LeBron James with Craig Carton. We'll do that next. Keep it right here on SportsGrid.
You wouldn't have your ex officiate your wedding.
Do you, Jake? Liar? Cheater? Gaslighter?
So why have anyone but America's largest injury law firm handle your injury case? With over $30 billion recovered for our clients, there's a reason to go big.
Gaslighter, coitus crier, he's got more red flags than a bullfighter's attire.
Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm.
If you are on the Eastern Seaboard, make sure you guys check out Craig Carton in the afternoon on WFAN. It's the best sports show in New York. He joins us now here. I got to get your take, man. All the hoopla, LeBron James, Philadelphia, Knicks and Sixers. Is the rivalry back? What's your takeaway on LeBron going to play in Philadelphia, Craig?
Yeah, I love how Philadelphia suddenly became a basketball town overnight. Remember how New York took over their building 2 out of the last 3 years in the postseason, and they stopped New Yorkers from buying tickets to games because they were so embarrassed by the fact that there were more of us than Sixers fans there. It's a garbage basketball town, and all of a sudden LeBron James shows up, and they think they're the capital of basketball. LeBron James going to the Sixers is like Aaron Rodgers coming to the Jets. Everybody in New York thought that Aaron Rodgers was going to suddenly bring the Jets to Super Bowl, and it didn't happen. Everybody in Philadelphia thinks that LeBron's going to do that. So let's go through it. Jaylen Brown's a stud. Tyrese Maxey's a stud. I own that. VJ Edgecombe's going to be a great second-year player. I loved what he did his rookie year. So, number one, you now add Joel Embiid for what, about 9 games this year? You add LeBron James for what? 40 games this year if you're lucky. So here's the first question. How many games are Jaylen Brown, Tyrese Maxey, Joel Embiid, and LeBron James going to play together? I think the over-under is 20. All right, yeah. So you're not going to get those guys together. Number two, we know what Joel Embiid is. His body, unfortunately, has let him down. He's never available. And when he is available, he spends most of his time laying down on the court, right? I love the fact that Philadelphia thinks adding a 42-year-old LeBron James is now enough to overcome the team that swept them in the playoffs last year. What's that team's name? The Knicks, world champion New York Knicks. Now, the aspect I do love about it is that I suppose it's a renewal of the rivalry, but you have to remember this. When's the last time, quick trivia for you, when's the last year the Philadelphia 76ers beat the New York Knicks in the postseason? Tick-tock, 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 1983. It's been 43 years since a Sixers team outed a Knicks team in the postseason. That streak continues through 2027, sir.
Wow, that's the last time the Sixers won the NBA championship.
That's
was
also
1983. Correct. I mean, holy cow here. But again, so Embiid is the factor here, though, right? Last 3 years, Craig, this guy's not played north of 39 ball games.
Yeah,
what
he's not going to this year.
He's going to play north of that this year.
And here's what you're going to start hearing, Dan, because it's an annual event, kind of like when that little rat sees his shadow and goes back in its hole. Groundhog, right? So here's what you're going to start hearing. I guarantee you start hearing this in mid-September. Boy, Joel Embiid's never looked healthier. Joel Embiid's in great shape. Joel Embiid lost 30 pounds in the offseason, put on muscle. It's the same crap every single year. And unfortunately, because I acknowledge that when that dude plays, he's awesome. He's a great basketball player, right? But he's never available. You guys always talk about what's the greatest ability in the world? Availability. Joel Embiid is never available. Now, that being said, I can also own the fact, well, I'm a diehard Knicks fan, that a backcourt of Tyrese Maxey and Jaylen Brown is awesome. That's great backcourt for you. But what else you got? Like, who else are we giving the rock to? And then let's also be honest about it. You know, one of the things that blew up the Celtics was there weren't enough balls to go around between Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. So here's my question. Down by 1, 10 seconds on the clock. Who gets the ball to take the last shot for the Sixers?
Edgecombe to me, or Maxey for me.
Well, it's Maxey's team. It's Embiid's team. Jaylen Brown's just going to give the ball up? LeBron James is going to be happy being a decoy?
No.
Right.
No.
They've got problems around how many balls are there to go around, and number two, and this, I think, is a bigger problem for the Sixers. One of the things that made the Knicks champions was their depth. Everybody on that bench got in, and in the playoffs especially, believe it or not, played meaningful minutes, right?
Yeah.
The Sixers have no depth at all. Zero.
Boy, that's right. That's going to be a great task for Nick Nurse to try to figure out, because that's the one thing that Mike Brown figured out, like you said, and how to do the rotation off the bench.
That's
there.
how the Knicks
Hey,
won.
Craig,
Like
that's right.
Brunson's amazing, obviously. OG's amazing. The Knicks won because they got great play, not good play, out of their backups, whether it's Jose Alvarado. They got, or Mitchell Robinson, who doesn't start for them. They got great play out of their bench. Their depth was the best in the league. And they were a great defensive team also. Statistically, the best defensive team in the East. I think second only maybe to the Thunder out West. The Sixers are not a good defensive team. And if you have Embiid and LeBron on the court at the same time, that's two old guys who cannot get back on defense. That's a matchup problem for them against a lot of teams.
Craig, what's 2.0 Knicks going to be this coming season, in your opinion? What are you expecting this coming season from this Knicks team?
I think it's pretty much what you got last regular season. They'll win low to mid 50s, maybe a little bit better than that, possibly. They're running it back, essentially. They'll be, a top 3 seed. I'm not even guaranteeing you they're the 1 seed. They were the 3 seed last year. So they'll be a top 3 seed. And they're one of those teams where their season really doesn't start until the end of April, right? Because we know they're going to win 50-plus games. We know they're a playoff team. We've got, got the target on our backs as defending champions, but they're like, a handful of teams. They're like the Thunder, the Spurs. We know we're in the postseason. Then it just comes down to seeding and who do we play and is it a good matchup for us? That's all it is.
Last question here for you. I'm great friends with Alex Cora, former Hurricane. Does he take that Mets gig?
I don't think he's going to be offered the Mets job. If he's offered it, you take it, right? I think they're leaning more towards a guy like Carlos Beltran. I think they're leaning more towards a guy like Albert Pujols, two guys that have obviously never managed. Beltran was supposed to manage and never started because of the cheating scandal that has followed him around his playing career. Alex Cora is the most accomplished of those guys, obviously, as the Red Sox manager. I think Met fans would love it if they did hire him. But the two names that we keep hearing, and we could be wrong, obviously, are Pujols and Beltran. I tell you the guy I would hire, and they'll never hire him because he's too feisty and fiery. I would hire Wally Backman, former New York Met. Should have had the Diamondbacks job years ago, and then obviously had some personal issues that prevented him from starting at that job. He's been very successful in the minors. He doesn't accept crap from anybody. I love Wally Backman, but I know he's got no chance of getting it.
Craigie, thank you, brother. Afternoon Drive, WFAN. Thank you.
Have a great weekend.
Boy, I'll tell you, we got a brand new wave of young college superstars of the past in today's football game. We really do. I mean, Jaden Daniels and his representatives, the starting quarterback for the Washington Commanders, have now sent a letter to LSU telling them cease and desist on using his name and likeness for anything moving forward when it comes to promoting the football program. Guess what it's based on? Lane Kiffin giving the number 5 to a recruit. This is where we are now. He felt disrespected from a recruit getting his number 5. I didn't know the hallowed number 5 there at LSU was held in high regard like this. You got to be kidding me. And now he's told LSU, stop using my name. He's even asked for the copy of the Heisman Trophy that he won to be sent back to the Heisman folks. School gets one, player gets one. It's been that way since 1936. Dude, this is a war you don't want. LSU fans are crazy, and they're crazy in love with players that represent that football program. You would be held in such high regard and revered with one of the greatest fan bases in college football sports. Now you try to pick a fight, and you're starting a war with something you'll regret when you're 20 years from now. Kids, this is not where you want to be. Fighting over the number 5, Commanders quarterback Jaden Daniels addresses LSU nil story and makes it clear his full personal focus is on the 26th season. Not true. He's been locked into training camp. LSU was sent a letter this past week by his representatives saying that they don't want anything to do with the football program. Guy, this is not where you want to be. You build your legacy for a reason. But here, this is where we are in college sports today. Remember something. Jaden Daniels is not loyal to LSU because of transfer and because of all the things that you get a chance to do now and the amount of money that you're making. You're not loyal to these football programs. You're loyal to yourself because you're trying to build a brand. This is more about his brand than what an impact that he left behind there in Baton Rouge. 20 years from now, he'll look back on this, and this was a mistake. This is a battle you don't want to go with, and you don't want to go forward with. Because 20 years from now, when LSU is talking about the greatest football players that have ever played there, your name won't be brought up. Every football player has and wants to be known for their legacy. You know, the only people who don't talk about legacies are people who don't have legacies. And this is something that, again, this is a battle you don't want based over giving the number 5 away. This is not something where, you know, a nil award where you gave the program some money. Like I could see Troy Aikman being ticked off at UCLA over Dante Moore going up to Oregon after he gave an X amount of money with a nil payment when he was there at UCLA before he transferred. I could get Troy being upset with that. But over giving a player and a prospect his college football number, you've got to be kidding me. This is not something you want to be in, and this is not something that you really want LSU to have to deal with. Look, building a college football resume and building one of the greatest legacies of all time when you're talking your football career, I value what I did at the University of Miami. I've got a legacy at Miami, and I'm guarding that legacy at the University of Miami. It may not be what Warren Sapp or it may not be what Ray Lewis or those guys accomplished, but to me, it matters. And it matters to every football player that's ever played at any of the big-time college football schools. Many people will look at you years from now and say, wow, I remember those great teams. CNN just did a story on us and my football team, and that was 40 years ago. The story came out this week, and it talked about our accomplishments. It talked about what we meant to the college game of today. It talked about how much that we were mavericks in what college sports is today and how it looks. That was 40 years ago. And that article just came out with CNN and talked about the 1980s Canes. he'll do the same thing 20 years from now, looking back on this saying, Guy, why would I go after LSU over the simplest thing of a kid getting his number? Makes most sense. But this is the landscape, and this is where we are in college sports today with the college player. It's not about the school anymore, and it's not about the name on the front of the jersey. It's more about the name on the back of the jersey, unfortunately. And this is where the game is today, and this is where college players are today. It's about brand, it's about your likeness, it's about your image, and it's about how much nil you can make. That's where you are in today's college sports, unfortunately. We will see you tomorrow. We will see you on the flip side.